Hey everybody, WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. I'm your host, Craig Lindell, and we are officially into the month of July. Soon enough, we will be talking about Cleveland Browns for real. I'm very excited about that. Believe it or not, I really am. I'm actually excited about that. This is going to be another Cavs podcast mostly. I'm also going to touch on the Indians because the Indians just can't seem to get any momentum and keep it, and it's driving me a little bit crazy. But first, once again, I'm going to talk about Dan Gilbert. Dan Gilbert is basically a disaster right now. The Cavaliers have one of the best teams in the East, and once Chauncey Billups turns down the opportunity to be the president, somehow now we're in a spot where Chauncey Billups, somebody who is not really qualified for a front office job, is not only turning down the Cavaliers to be their president and Dan Gilbert's money, turning down all that free money. I guess not free money, he was going to work for it, but not only turning down the gig, but like turning down the gig when there have been no other candidates. The Cavaliers don't have a GM candidate. Kobe Altman is the leftover executive or personnel person who's running the Cavaliers front office right now. And they're doing things. They re-signed Kyle Korver. But you can't look at what's going on with the Cavaliers right now and feel good. There's no way to spin this as everything's just fine. I liken it to the way I used to talk about the Browns when Eric Mangini was hired and George Kokinis was let go. You know, I used to say things like, well, maybe it'll all work out. Maybe this, maybe that. And that's the best that you can say right now with the Cavaliers is that, well, maybe Kobe Altman becomes the GM and the Cavaliers find a president internally, or maybe they don't need one. But the fact is, right now, Dan Gilbert either has a plan that's not working or doesn't have a plan. There's no way to spin this and make it sound good. The Cavaliers lose out on the one and only candidate they were rumored to be going after. Not even rumored, I guess it's official, but they fail to land this guy, and they fail to land this guy who people had giant questions about anyway. So what are we even talking about? You've got the best player in the league, you've got the best team in the East, and as everybody else is in the prime time of personnel moves between the draft and free agency, the Cavaliers are on the sidelines doing nothing, and Dan Gilbert looks like he has no idea what he's doing. There's no other way to spin it. If anybody thinks that he knows what he's doing, it's all just speculation. You're making up a fantasy thing. The theory that I brought up a couple weeks ago with Joe Lull saying that it could be a brilliant strategy to have Chauncey Billups not officially take the job. I still think that was an interesting theory, but now it's basically been proven to be untrue. We know for a fact it's not true. The Cavaliers weren't operating at another level, playing chess while other people are playing checkers, allowing Chauncey Billups to talk to players when, if he was a Cavaliers employee, he wouldn't have been able to. That's not what happened. Now we know that's not true. So to sit here and try and think of ways that the Cavaliers are winning the game and winning the offseason and otherwise making good moves, it's fantasy land. It's utter fantasy land. There's no way to make that case with any legitimacy other than, it's basically a conspiracy theory. If you think the Cavaliers are doing a good job and setting themselves up well, that's your conspiracy theory. There's no proof. None. And Dan Gilbert, who knows what he's doing? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. He had a fallout with Griffin. He apparently had no backup plan. And now in the most important offseason in the history of the franchise, which is every offseason that LeBron James is soon to be a free agent, he's got no plan. And looks like he's got no end in sight to the lack of a plan. It's very scary. So I don't know who they should offer the job to, but would it be a bad idea to just give the whole thing over to LeBron's people at this point? I mean, would that be worse than what we've got going right now? Would it be worse than Maverick Carter running the Cavaliers? Would you feel better or worse about the long-term prospects of the Cleveland Cavaliers if one of LeBron's people was team president? I'd feel better. I'd feel better because I'd think that meant that LeBron was going to stay. I'd think that it would make me feel better because it would have LeBron recruiting teammates and talking to people and trying to get people to jump on board for whatever minuscule amounts of cap money the Cavaliers have left. It would give the Cavaliers flexibility in the trade market. Instead of demanding a trade to Houston, maybe Chris Paul demands a trade to the Cavaliers. Obviously, that doesn't totally work out for the Cavaliers in terms of cap space, but I mean, this is how business is done in the NBA today. And the Cavaliers have the best player and maybe the most influential player, but he's not working for you right now. Who knows if he would have worked for Griffin, but I'll tell you what, he's not working for Kobe Altman. He's not giving assurances to Dan Gilbert that he's going to stay long term. We know this. We know this. Someday, LeBron James and his continued support won't mean as much. Just like when Kobe Bryant was at the end of his career, he wasn't worth the money and he didn't have the influence anymore. But guess what? Right now, LeBron still has all the juice. He's got it. He's got it, and he's not giving it to the Cavaliers. You can blame LeBron James for that all you want, but the reality of the situation is what it is. You know, you don't have to like the fact that LeBron James has so much power, and you don't have to like the fact that he's not using it to benefit the Cavaliers, but you have to understand it. And right now, if Dan Gilbert does understand it, he doesn't really care. And that's at odds with me and my goals as a Cleveland Cavaliers fan. That's what makes me mad. That's what's driving me crazy right now. I don't care about anything other than the continued success of the Cavaliers for me as a fan. That includes keeping LeBron James happy. And I don't understand why Dan Gilbert's not bending over backwards more for LeBron James. And I know that sounds crazy because, you know, he is probably bending over backwards somewhat for LeBron anyway. But if LeBron leaves after next season, let's say the Cavaliers are worth $2 billion. Do you think the Cavaliers are worth $400 million less without LeBron on the roster? I think you can make the case. If you're out here buying a team and you're given the opportunity to buy the Cavaliers, are they worth $2 billion with LeBron James and $1.6 million without? Are they worth $1.7 million? I don't know. I don't know how much LeBron's worth, but his partnership is worth a hell of a lot more than whatever he has to be paid. And so for me, I'm doing whatever I need to do to keep his camp happy, to keep him in a continued recruiting role and a long-term plan for the team. Someday, I'm giving him a wink nudge deal to sell him the team. You know, let him maximize the value and then pay the price to buy it from you. I don't know. I mean, that would be buying low and selling high, would it not? I'm sure that's not actually legal. I know it's not, but you look at what happened with Kevin Durant signing a deal for less money than he could totally make in Golden State. And I have to believe those kinds of things are happening, so why not with Dan Gilbert and LeBron? But it seems like maybe Dan Gilbert's ego is just too big. He just can't possibly handle that kind of a thing going on. You know, he fashions himself as the owner forever and ever and ever. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Let's talk about that Kevin Durant deal. There's a lot of talk about the extra $7 million that Kevin Durant could have made, which actually saved the owners of the Warriors about $25 million. And Tom Ziller, an otherwise great writer, a good basketball mind, a great follow on Twitter, was talking in his piece about how it was the latest in the empowerment of the NBA player. It's part of their agency and their freedom of agency in free agency as NBA players. And while I kind of agree with what he's saying, I understand what he's saying, I don't feel like it actually accurately tells the tale. The Warriors re-signed Andre Iguodala. They gave a Supermax deal to Steph Curry. They still have the ability to pay Sean Livingston. They have the ability to keep all their existing players. They're still going to be over the cap and unable to sign any new people. But structurally, Kevin Durant leaving money on the table didn't enable the Warriors to do a single thing other than save Joe Lacob and that ownership group a bunch of money. So this idea that Kevin Durant is magnanimous, heroic for sacrificing to keep the Warriors together isn't really true. Him leaving money on the table didn't leave that extra $5 million in cap space so that they could get the Iguodala deal done. They're still over the cap. By signing for less than his max value, Kevin Durant just ensured they'd be less over the cap. He saved them luxury tax money. And now, for what? What was the consideration? Anytime any two people make a deal, there's consideration on both sides. And sometimes when you give to charity, you do so because it makes you feel good about yourself. But even in a scenario like that, there's a consideration. If giving $50 makes you feel this good and $75 makes you feel that good, you're going to choose between this and that. And that's up to you. But in business, where Kevin Durant needs to, or presumably should want to, maximize his earnings while also making it so his team can be as successful as possible, he didn't make the team able to be any more successful by leaving money on the table. All he did was leave money on the table. And for what? For what? That's the question. And that's where my antenna go up. And I assume there's got to be some kind of a wink, nudge, future promise that would cause Kevin Durant to leave that $7 million on the table, enabling it gets complicated, but it saved the ownership there $25 million in 1 year. Now, that $25 million savings, why would Kevin Durant give that to them? Why would he do it? Just because he's a nice guy? Because he thinks he's made enough money? There's no structural difference to the roster by him leaving that money on the table. So you're telling me Kevin Durant just gave up money for nothing? He was cajoled into giving up that money because it's in the best interest of the Warriors? And not their roster, but just their financial statement? Did the Warriors owners say, hey, look, we're not willing to keep Iguodala unless you leave money on the table, and then Kevin Durant was willing to leave money on the table? If so, why would this millionaire give that benefit to the billionaires? Why would you do that? That's the question. Why? And I want to know the answer. We might never find out. But this is the same kind of thing that, I think it was the Timberwolves got into trouble with Joe Smith. You're not allowed to make deals outside the realm of the salary cap. And if this doesn't raise people's antenna on this kind of a deal, I don't know what will. And look, I get it. Coming from a Cavaliers fan, it just sounds like bitter, sour grapes, all that kind of stuff. And I am bitter, that the Cavaliers didn't win the championship. I wanted them to win. But I'm not that bitter. I just know that the Warriors could keep that team together, and the Cavaliers were going to have to try and find a way to beat them. And it was going to be really hard, if not impossible, for the Cavaliers to beat the Warriors in 2017, 2018. But I also know that keeping that team together should cost a certain amount of money. And for some reason, whatever reason, Kevin Durant and the Warriors decided that it should cost $25 million less. They lessened the financial burden. They decreased the amount of money that Lacob and the rest of the Warriors ownership have to pay to their fellow owners in luxury tax. And if I'm Dan Gilbert, if I'm any one of these other NBA owners, Mark Cuban, and I see this kind of a deal go on, I'm going to wonder what's going on in Golden State too. I'm going to wonder why that extra $25 million isn't being split among the other owners in the NBA who qualify for that redistribution of tax money. I'm going to wonder why Kevin Durant just magically left $7 million on the table, and by leaving that $7 million on the table, took $25 million out of the coffers of other NBA owners. So I don't know that we've heard the last of this. And call me bitter Cavs fan all you want, but this is mysterious. It's mysterious. It needs answers. We need to shine some light on it. Maybe Kevin Durant's just that nice of a guy. Maybe he just loves Joe Lacob that much. But it's hard to imagine a scenario that there wasn't some kind of other promise or consideration. One promise or consideration that might or might not have violated the salary cap rules. And yes, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, because if those kinds of things are happening and they're going unreported, if I'm Dan Gilbert, I'm making all kinds of promises to LeBron to bring him and his juice back on board in free agency, in trades, in everything, and trying to make the Cavaliers a formidable opponent for the Warriors next year. All right, let's talk about Gordon Hayward. He signed with the Boston Celtics. I retweeted Bomani Jones, who said that yes, the Celtics are better, but they've still got a big three of players where you don't want, if you're building a championship contender, you don't want any of the three players, in this case, Isaiah Thomas, Gordon Hayward, and Al Horford, as your best player. You would love to have any three of those guys, but you don't want any of those three guys to be the very best player on your championship contender. And I think it's funny. I think it's true. In a league where Golden State has Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and the rest of the players, and the Cavaliers have LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and the rest of the players, you're really going to come in and do battle with Isaiah Thomas, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, and the rest of the players? And the Celtics aren't finished. I like Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown's going to continue to get better. I think he has a chance to be a real star in the NBA. But they've got to unload Marcus Smart probably. They have to unload Jay Crowder probably. When you get yourself into a playoff series or over the course of 82 games, you need players like that. They're not the stars. They're not going to carry you to a championship, but you need players like that. They are difference makers over the course of an 82-game season and over the course of a long playoff scenario where you need to win, 16 games? They're important players. They're very important players. And the Celtics are not only top-heavy without having a true top-of-the-league superstar, but they're now going to be even more top-heavy because they're going to have to get rid of a lot of those really key role player types. And yes, power to them with Jaylen Brown improving, being on the upswing. That's a real benefit. But it's hard to imagine a scenario where the Celtics are going to be favored in a series against the Cavaliers right now. Obviously, if LeBron leaves, the Celtics will probably be the favorite in the East. But at least for one more year, the Cavaliers got that going on them. And I'm fully happy to watch the Cavaliers match up with the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals or anywhere else in the Eastern playoffs. should they meet up. So, last but not least, let's talk about the Indians a little bit. Yan Gomes. This is not hatred for Yan Gomes. I love Yan Gomes. I actually met Yan before he kind of became a very good player. When he first got back to the Indians, he was doing one of those meet and greets up near Kids Land, whatever they call it, at Progressive Field. And my kids waited in line. It was one of those days that Yan was not playing, and we got to meet Yan Gomes. And he seems like one of the best dudes. It's just, I root hard for him, but at a certain point, Major League Baseball is a business, and you have to look at your assets and your different players, and you have to make tough decisions. Now, I don't know how much longer the Indians keep running Yan Gomes out there to have mediocre at-bats, and now even some suspect defense. I don't want to call into question Yan Gomes' ability over one play, but when the ball arrives at the plate and beats a player by 15 feet, and you take it to a replay, and there's some question as to whether or not the Indians are going to get the out or not, like, that's a big issue. That's a big problem. That's something that you can't just fluff off. You have to talk about that. And that's exactly what happened in the July 4th loss to the San Diego Padres. I can't remember who was coming in to score, but Carlos Santana got pulled off the bag at first. He made a wise throw to home plate, beat the play by about 15 feet. Kind of looked like the guy was going to give himself up to Yan Gomes, who was clearly had him beat. And then at the last minute, he kind of slid, kind of deked and slid. And the Indians won the replay review, but if you ask me honestly, I think he might have beaten the throw. He might have beaten the tag. And again, it's just an anecdote. It's one play. You can't cast your entire opinion on Yan Gomes over one play. But if he's not even going to be a top of the team defensive kind of person at catcher, and he's not going to hit, at a certain point you have to start looking to the minors. There are options. There's options. I'm not one who's overly familiar with prospects all the time, but I know there's a catching prospect named Mejia, or Mejia, I don't know. I read his name more than I've heard it spoken, but Indians fans kind of want to see him. And at a certain point, even though the Indians are still in first place and their division isn't great, there's time. You don't have to cast aside a proven guy like Yan Gomes forever and ever, and certainly not too quickly. But what's too quickly? I don't know, but I think it's time. I think it's time to really start thinking about it. We're at the All-Star break. The Indians have 5 All-Stars. They're in first place, at least right now. They play in that weak division. They should have a real good chance to keep it going. But we got to start planning for that stretch run. You got to start planning for a playoff run, hopefully. And every inch counts, as we well know, as Michael Martinez was a deciding plate appearance in Game 7 of the World Series. And I'm not trying to redo, history. I'm not trying to rewrite history. But the decisions you make now and the experiences that you give players today will positively or negatively impact experiences that happen in the fall. And when you're planning this Cleveland Indians team, the way Kluber's pitching, the way the bullpen's constructed, everything that you do has to be considered in terms of playoff runs and hopeful World Series appearances. Can't count on them, but that's what you're building. And if that means making a tough choice on a really great, lovable player, somebody that we're rooting hard for like Yan Gomes, so be it. So be it. I think we might be at that point. I'd love your perspective. That's something that the EHC guys, Jim, Pete, Hattery, Namina, all those guys probably have more of an opinion on than I do, certainly on the podcast. But anyway, that's the podcast for today. I hope you had a great July 4th. Here's to a lot of great Browns talk. And by the way, we are looking for more Browns writers. So if you know of anybody, if you can think of anybody that you'd like to read, their thoughts on the Browns all season long, that's what we're looking for. You probably noticed we don't do traditional recaps all the time on baseball and basketball. We're looking to do more creative stuff with the Browns this season. We've got a nice stable of people right now, but we could use some more. So here's what the job entails. You're going to write about the Browns. You're going to talk about not just what happened, but you're going to talk about what it means to you, what it means to fans, what it means to their roster and the outlook of the team. You're going to do so on a semi-regular basis, probably a couple times a week during the season, at least a couple times a week during the season. You're going to make a little bit of money. You're not going to get paid a lot. Writing at Waiting for Next Year is a passion. It's a passion job. It's a really nice hobby job. It pays a few dollars a year, more than a few dollars a year. We can get into that, but it's not going to replace your income. It's not going to be a full-time job. It's not going to be a part-time job, but it's a great place to build your voice. It's a great place to learn what it takes to blog or write about sports. It's a place to be as creative as you want to be, other than dropping a bunch of F-bombs. And it's a great place to take advantage of the audience. We've got a really great audience of commenters. We've got a great feedback network, as opposed to writing certain places where the comments are brutal all the time, or posting videos at YouTube where the comments can be really crazy. We've got a really good community of people who you can interact with. It's a great group of people to write for, to work with, to interact with. So that's what you get. If you know of anybody, send an email to jobs@waitingfornextyear.com. Put in the subject line, Browns writer. I'm not putting this out to everywhere, we're looking for somebody who understands the culture of Waiting for Next Year. We're looking for somebody with the maturity level of what we like to do at Waiting for Next Year, and also the immaturity level of what we like to do at Waiting for Next Year. So we know we've got kind of a distinct style and voice, and that's what we're looking to continue. So we're hoping to find that in a Browns writer. We're not looking for somebody who's exactly like what we do now, but we're looking for somebody who fits in with kind of what we do now. So you know who we are, you know what we sound like, you know your favorite writers over the years. So let us know. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again soon. It's been the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast.